Good evening. My name is Nathaniel Shimkovitz, and it has been a proper eternity since I've been in front of the camera. Uh, I know that you're probably thinking this is the video where I tell you what's been going on lately. You're going to be disappointed, unfortunately, here. This is not the video you're looking for. What this actually is me following up on something I said even longer ago. Uh, Reviews. I haven't done one in 4 years. In fact, I don't even remember what I was reviewing the last time, but I know it's not relevant. Now, the point is I'm doing them again, and I'm going to be a lot more diligent about this, especially because I have a slightly better plan of what I'm doing. I still don't have much of one, but slightly better. Again, just to reiterate the rules, I'm not reviewing just one thing. It's not just going to be movies or this, that, or the other thing. It's going to be movies, books, games, whatever. Hell, if I get a new gun or I feel like I'm passionate, or angry enough about it, I will probably review it. So, just to get started off again, I just got back from seeing Dunkirk, the new Christopher Nolan blockbuster about the largest troop evacuation in history. Just to give the full context of this kind of story, I said say spoilers, but it's been 70 years. I think you can figure out the events by now. So, this is all set in 1940, right at the start of World War II, just after the Nazis have pretty much completely overwhelmed France. The British retrograded to northern France to prevent their certain annihilation and also to build combat power and prepare for the imminent attack by the German military. By the time that the British began their retreat, the Germans had already taken Calais and a number of other ports that were closer to England, so their only option left to get back was the port of Dunkirk, which was a tidal port, which made it very difficult to get vessels of higher tonnage in to get a mass flow of troops out. There was a time window with the tides to get these ships in, is the point, and there was only really one, I forget what they call it in the movie, but there's really only like one pier where they could get soldiers out on to these larger ships. So, as a result of this, over the course of about a month, and numerous attacks by the Luftwaffe and German infantry, the British were able to evacuate 330,000 of their own soldiers and thousands of French troops out of the port of Dunkirk before the Germans completely overwhelmed the town. Now, the reason this was possible was because the British employed civilian ships. And by ships, I don't mean actual ship out, fishing vessels, private yachts, things like that. Smaller vessels to get into the tidal lands, get these troops out more directly in some heavier ferries and stuff like that. But basically, civilian ships turned a very sour evacuation for the British in what is quoted in the film as a military disaster into what is known as the miracle at Dunkirk, able to evacuate all these men, bring them home. So, after thoroughly spoiling the events of the entire film with the historical events you have about 70 years to read up on, it's very obvious that the story is not exactly going to be the strength of this picture. But by God, is it a strong film. So, to break it down for you, this is probably one of the better Christopher Nolan movies out there. It uses all his tropes that he does, maybe with one or two exceptions. I'll get into that in a second. But basically, to break down the structure of this, if I had to draw the closest parallel in his filmography, it reminds me the most of Inception. You have three levels of, three stories that this takes place on. You have one by land, which takes place over the course of about a week. Twoth by sea, which takes place over the course of about a day. And threeth by air, which takes place by about an hour. Okay, so all these stories intertwine at some point toward the end of the film, and builds up to that in a pretty great way. At the beginning, there's some pacing issues just because of where story 1 is starting, where story 2 and 3 already come in later. So it's a little much to take on at the beginning, but eventually, as everything starts to build up, it starts to become a little bit more cohesive. Things start to make a little more sense. Even better than Lost, after 7 seasons of doing that. But pretty much it has some pacing issues at the beginning, a huge rubber band effect. A little worse than Inception because it was all taking place at the same time, just elongating time. This suffers some pacing issues at the beginning, but those get rectified quickly toward the middle of the film. So that's all well and good. The acting in this is really interesting. The casting in this is brilliant, but this is Christopher Nolan you're talking about. He could probably give you the most absurd casting choice you can imagine. He could probably I can't think of an analogy for this right now, but basically though, he can just think of the most crazy casting choice you can think of. Christopher Nolan would make it work. And this is no exception. He puts actors in these roles and they perform them admirably. But unlike most Christopher Nolan movies where they usually tout up their dialogue and make it overly important, he doesn't have that crutch to lean on. The film is about 106 minutes. And there's maybe 10 minutes of dialogue at the most. I didn't time it because I was in a movie theater. On the home release, I'll probably do that just for shits and giggles, just to see how it all works out. But very little dialogue in this. It's all about their mannerisms, their look, the way they walk, the way they look at a scenario, stuff like that. The tension all comes from their mannerisms, and honestly, they all execute it perfectly. Kenneth Branagh, Tom Hardy, Cillian Murphy, everyone does a great job in this. There are some actors whose names I don't know, some younger, less-known actors in this too, and they all do great. Everyone does a great job in this picture. The story and the character were a little bit weak, but the driving force of this is just the scenario itself, the ticking clock, and how desperate everyone is to survive and get off that beach. That's where this all really comes into play, and they're just the way they act. It's all perfect in that regard. Now, one of the things that everyone else always hypes up a lot is the lack of special effects in this, and the truth is, they're lying to you. I don't mean there's a lot of CG in this. There's a lot of practical effects in this, a lot of practical camera work, a lot of in-camera work. That's great. All the aerial choreography and Spitfires and Messerschmitts, they're real. The ships are real actual moving objects. The set's really flooded. It was all great. It made everything feel really immersive, really visceral. I think there's only one instance of CG in the movie that I can remember. And even then, it was so minuscule, I barely noticed it. So, everything in camera is immersive and believable. The cinematography is great. Christopher Nolan, his 70mm fetish is finally paid off. Most, if not all, probably all of this film was on 70mm. I know most of his IMAX films, Dark Knight forward, he switched aspect ratios a lot between 70mm, 35mm. Interstellar was mostly 70mm, but he had some 35 shots in there. But for the most part, though, everything was on 70mm. I have to watch on that to confirm it, but for the most part, looked incredible. Didn't have any of the distracting aspect ratio changes to distract me. So, well done, good job there. But looking good is one thing. Acting convincingly is one thing. Both of those things can be killed if your sound design is terrible. And in this, the sound design is great. All the sound effects, the plane engines, the machine gun fire from what it sounds like on the inside of a Spitfire, it's all great. It's all great, really well done stuff, really immersive. The silence is probably one of the more interesting sounds in this movie too. Just not hearing anything, the tension of what's going to go wrong next in those moments of silence is great. But probably the best thing about this film by a country mile is Hans Zimmer's soundtrack. It's what a lot of times what you expect out of a Christopher Nolan film: tense, loud, bombastic. Really drives the action here and there. But probably the best little detail that he threw in there was the ticking clock. I think he used the metronome to do it, but that's beside the point. That ticking clock carries over through all the storylines. And Land, it ticks the slowest. Air, it ticks the fastest. Keeps you on the edge of your seat, wondering what's going to happen next at all times. It is amazing. And it's all really good. And I have to say, special props probably go to the climax of this because, truth be told, I'm a huge Christopher Nolan fan, but I've always had a problem with how he does the climaxes in his movies here and there. I mean, it's not always the case, but the worst offender that I can recall off the top of my head is The Dark Knight. No, I'm sorry. The Batman Begins, that's what I meant to say. Batman Begins climax is so poorly done, in my opinion, just because the intercutting didn't work in that, and how it just all it did is just reiterate the stakes we already knew about. And it's just always a repetition of information, a lot of the climaxes, mostly in the Dark Knight trilogy, but the climax in this boils perfectly over. It's almost like Inception, how they keep intercutting between everything. To really dilate this moment out and just to see how perfectly they can get it. It's almost like that. There's a little bit of reiteration here and there, but it works. Works to this film's favor this time. And honestly, everything's tense. Everything's tense in that final moment. It's all good, really well done filmmaking. Is all I have to say about it. If you're looking for a movie this summer that's not spectacle over substance slog, if you're looking for a brilliant piece of cinematography, a really tense work that really nails the terror of war, this is your film. Quit wasting your time. Go see Dunkirk. Go see it on the big screen. That is mandatory. And if you can't do that, get your hands on the best sound system you can and the biggest TV you can get your hands on. You need to see this in the largest format you can. So, that's really all I got to say. Really phenomenal, well done movie. Glad I got to go see it. I'm probably going to refine these reviews a little bit, maybe get them down a little shorter, maybe take a few notes as I go here, but go see Dunkirk. This is Nathaniel Shimkovitz, signing off.